Welcome to the Weird Gig Podcast. I'm your host, Kara Kesselring. Today's guest is the host of the Discovery Science podcast, Curiosity Daily, Ms. Ashley Hamer. In addition to podcasting, Ashley is a professional tenor sax player, playing jazz, pop, and funk. On today's show, Ashley and I talk about Bill Nye the Science Guy and all things podcaster. If she could have lunch with anyone living or dead, who would it be? And whoa, it's weird being a lady in the music scene. But first, Ashley tells the tale of her space-themed weirdest gig. I'll title this story, Aliens Landed on New Year's Eve.
The band leader who called me for this gig is a guy named John Chikora. And he's a fantastic guitar player. His musicianship is just incredible. And I knew him because he had hired me for another weird gig in the past. And that is this show that happens every August. Well, happened, it's been COVID, but called The Fly Honey Show. And this is an incredible variety show that's kind of a mix of burlesque and drag and political commentary, and it's very LGBTQ friendly. And you'll have trans performers, and you'll have people from every gender and ethnicity. And every body size. It's really cool. So there's a lot of lingerie. There's a lot of fishnets. There's a lot of leather, and the band is really cool. And they strive to make the band. They strive to fill the band with diverse players. So. Actually, the last time I did it, the entire horn section was female, which was really cool. Mm-hmm. So that's a weird gig because they'll have you play yakety sax while one of the dancers runs around with her top off, like really weird stuff. And so I had done that with him for a few years. So it wasn't that strange to hear when he emailed me and said, hey, we have this gig at Soho House in Chicago on New Year's Eve. So yes, New Year's Eve gig. You always want a New Year's Eve gig.
Yes.
And it's space themed. Awesome. I love space. And we're going to play the Cantina Band theme from Star Wars for this space themed party. And you're going to have to wear a Cantina Band mask. So if you've never seen Star Wars, these masks, the Cantina Band, they're these sort of insect-looking animals with giant bulbous flesh-colored heads and big insect-looking eyes. And to wear that as a mask, it goes completely over your head, over your face. And you may be realizing at this point that to play a saxophone in a mask like that is going to be very difficult. But I was ready because I really wanted to. This seemed like the coolest gig in the world. It's just so weird that I was going to be able to tell stories like this one for the rest of my life. So we show up to the gig, and kind of the gig was we would play the Cantina Band song and then a couple other pop tunes. We did something that was we did a Prince tune. We did some other stuff that we had actually done for Fly Honey. And I played clarinet for the Cantina Band thing, and then I switched to saxophone for some of the others. And we would do that every hour on the hour from 9 p.m. to midnight. So the first time I get to try on the mask is at sound check. So we had already had a rehearsal, but at sound check, I try on the mask. And I play 2 notes, and I am about to pass out. I can't breathe.
Did you cut holes in the nose?
So that's the thing. So at first, and the other thing is, I was the only horn player. There was a guitar player, a bass player, and a keyboard. But so they were all fine. So at first, I cut little holes. I didn't want to mess up. They gave me this mask. I didn't want to mess it up. I was going to try to give it back to them, right? And little holes were not good enough. That was not enough air. So eventually, what I did is I kind of did. I cut a slit from the neck all the way up to my mouth, which actually worked out pretty well because it wasn't a very visible opening. The mask stayed together pretty well, but I could get some air. And so we're here. I'm, black cocktail dress, giant, ugly alien mask, playing clarinet with the Cantina band. And also couldn't see the music. Would have been good to memorize this stuff, but didn't do that. There's the eyes were plastic, like dark plastic, and so you could sort of see, but of course everything fogged up because I was breathing inside this mask.
Well, and you wear glasses. Do you have contacts?
Yeah, I was wearing contacts, so that was good.
Okay.
But yeah, we did it. So first hour we played the Cantina band theme. We played all the other stuff. People seemed to like it. And then that was it. They didn't want us to take off the masks on stage, right? So we had to find our way through this throbbing crowd back to like a storage closet, and then take off these masks and be able to breathe for a little while. And then we were able to like walk around normally in Soho House. But the other thing about Soho House is that, I don't know, they're kind of snobby. Like the people who belong there. Like I remember one time I had been there on a date and it was like, this was the move that the guy did. He's like, I am a member of Soho House and I'm going to take you to Soho House. It's that kind of thing. Like you got to pay a membership. So we didn't really fit in. And the other thing was that they didn't provide any food. So like we were there from 9 to midnight with no food, and the cheapest thing that they had on the menu in-house was like a $17 burger. And so there was, and it's like we had like a 35-minute window between when we had to be back on stage. So it was like you had to like order the $17 burger, and then maybe you'd get it right before you had to go on stage, and then you would play, and then it would be cold. It was not the greatest gig in general, but the pictures are incredible. We have.
I love your picture.
Yeah, it's very cool. Like to describe it, it's me and the bass player are both women, so we're both in these black dresses and these ugly masks. And then the drummer and the guitar player are men, and they've got suits on, and we did a lot of posing in like the black light, and it's a great memory. It wasn't a great gig, but I don't think I would have had it any other way.
We'll be right back with more from Ashley Hamer. Who is Ashley? What do you do? What is your shtick?
So my original shtick is as a saxophone player. I have an undergrad and master's from University of North Texas in jazz, and I play the tenor saxophone and also some clarinet and flute and stuff like that. And I originally moved to Chicago to be a working musician. I got a gig as they needed a female saxophonist for a musical, which is strange that they needed a female, but it was actually specifically because they needed me to be on stage in an all-female band because the musical was Some Like It Hot, which is like the musical was Sugar, based on the movie Some Like It Hot from Marilyn Monroe.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that's my main shtick. I've done, I've been in jazz ensembles and big bands and funk bands, and just kind of whatever gig I'm hired for, I'll play it. I'm just, a gigging musician. And then as I kind of was working around Chicago, I think a lot of us have this experience where maybe you can't make ends meet just with music. So I was teaching lessons, I was doing gigs, but then on the side, I decided to, see if I could do some freelance writing. And that led to a full-time job writing, and that led to a full-time job science writing, which eventually turned into podcasting about science. So I am now the host of the discovery podcast, Curiosity Daily, where every day we talk about 2 to 3 fun things about science, something you didn't know. Maybe sometimes it's about history or maybe like a little life hack. But yeah, generally every day it's just something cool to learn. So that's kind of my shtick.
Yeah, I've learned so much from your show.
Oh.
It is so good. Is there a way that the listeners can find you?
Yeah. So I'm at ashleyhamer.online. Let me make sure that's right.
Yeah, and we'll put your info on our website as well.
And then that podcast is curiositydaily.com. And I also have a podcast that I started during the pandemic just myself because Curiosity Daily is so family friendly and we try to keep things light and fun. So I started a podcast.
Is it X-rated science?
It is not X-rated, but it is taboo science. Ooh. So it's basically
tell us more.
Yeah, it's about all the stuff that you're not supposed to talk about at the dinner table, or like the things that you might be embarrassed to ask about. So I've done episodes from cannibalism to obesity to I'm about to do one about why we eat animals. Just lots of things that are just, I dig into the science of kind of those uncomfortable questions. And it's been a lot of fun.
Mm-hmm. How do you research it?
Well, generally I'll interview a researcher who studies it or someone who's written a book about it. And then I'll fill in the blanks by kind of finding studies. I use the expertise that I have from Curiosity Daily to find those academic studies and kind of support them with that stuff. Yeah.
And do you have like a fact checker that works with you?
So I am the fact checker. So we have a team of writers who will write these scripts, and then I go through them and I make sure all the facts are right. And I also edit for content and things like that. So
do people have curious science questions that they bring to you, and then you therefore run out and make a show out of it?
Yeah. For Curiosity Daily, one of my favorite things to do is answer listener questions. We get a lot of questions about people's bodies. They want to know why they're, like, a recent one we answered was, why do I cough when I use an ear swab? Which is a thing. It turns out to be a lot of people have this reflex in their ear canal. And actually, I think it happens with musicians when they use musicians' earplugs because they're so form-fitting to your ear. Some people, they have a reflex in their ear that will activate their vagus nerve, and your vagus nerve controls your breathing, your heart rate, all sorts of stuff. So some people cough, some people gag. And it's just this thing in your ear.
So
it's like a button. It's so strange.
Let's talk a bit about being a gigging musician and the weirdness. I don't know what your experience is with being in a male-dominated profession. Oftentimes females in the music world are singers or actors that sing, but you are a jazz saxophone player, which is a very male-centric gig.
Yeah. I mean, I think it has gotten easier every year, and maybe that's because I'm getting older, but and like less of a target. But it was very hard in college. I had a really hard time in college, and I was so young that I didn't know how much of it was because I was a woman and how much of it was because college is hard. And I mean, it was a little of both. But I remember there was this moment where I visited New York and I hung out with some people who had gone to college with me but were several years ahead of me. So I looked up to them, but we didn't really hang out. And this female trombonist turns to me, we're drinking beers, and she's like, "You had it so hard," which was just, it blew my mind that this was like, I was like, wait, I'm unique? Like, I'm like, why? Like, you didn't have this experience? I mean, she was a lesbian, so that might have helped. But she's like, I just remember hearing what the guys would say about you, and I just couldn't believe it. And you had such a hard time in school, and I'm just like so impressed that you got through it. So that's a weird, like, identity shaking thing to hear from somebody, that it's not, you weren't just having the same hard experience as everybody else. Like you were, there was something specific that you were experiencing that a lot of people weren't. And some of those things were like, there was a guitar player who wanted to date me, and I said no. And then like a week later this was a master's class, there was a chalkboard that one of the professors pulled out, and on it was written, Ashley Hamer smells like a slut. Like in front of all of my, master's colleagues. Like these kinds of things. Just, I don't know. Like I just had this, I don't know why I was sort of a target to some of the men, but I would have things like that happen to me.
Right. That is crazy.
Yeah. It's the kind of thing where like I thought it was normal at the time, and looking back I'm like, oh no, this was not okay. So anyway, college was hard, but when I got to Chicago and I got into kind of a professional working situation, it became clear who was safe to work with and who wasn't. Like sometimes there would be band leaders who, rubbed you the wrong way, or who would say, there was one band I really wanted to play with, and the band leader, he said, yeah, maybe we will, maybe someday. And so finally I came to one of their gigs, and he's like, yeah, what, you want to come to the next gig and you can play? And I was like, yeah, that'd be great. And then he turns to another musician and he says, yeah, I thought it'd be cool to have like a hot girl in the band, so maybe we'll have her do that. And I was like, I thought he wanted me for my musicianship. I wanted, but it was just like this novelty. So, things, you just learn to stay away from those situations, and you learn who makes you comfortable. And I feel partially I feel lucky, but also partially I feel like I've really worked to find the people and find the bands that make me feel comfortable. And when I feel comfortable, I play at my best.
Yeah, Iris, my daughter, is in junior high and plays trombone, and is experiencing being in a section with all boys. She's in the jazz band, but I think it's curious that the jazz band has the kids dress with white long sleeve button down shirts and long black ties. And again, not that she needs to be wearing a dress or makeup or anything, but why can't she just wear something black that she likes, to be uniform? Why is it a man's tie?
Yeah.
I don't know. I think that seems jazz bands for boys, and boys wear ties. And she's one of the few that isn't. So I don't know.
I remember, you and I have talked about this a little bit before. Yeah, I've worn more ties than I feel like most women my age have in my life. And there's something about that. And I never really, until this moment, really thought about like, to be in this band, you need to wear a man's uniform. Like that is a symbol. Like they're sending a message that way.
Right.
Yeah.
And I don't think they're thinking hard. I don't think it's a nefarious decision. It just is, this is the conformity to be in jazz.
Yeah.
This is the conformity for boys.
Well, it's not nefarious, but it is just following a history that, this has always been for men. So there's never been a problem with everyone wearing suits. And then you have a woman show up and you're like, well, yeah, you just have to do what everyone else does. And it's like, you don't actually understand that there's always been a problem. And a woman showing up is just showing you that there's always been a problem. I have a funny story about being a female musician with an all male band though. I was playing with a bunch of salsa bands a few years back, and we played a gig at a casino. And I was, you and I were talking about being in suits and ties. What was it? Yeah, so I was in a like a powder blue. Okay, sorry. I was in a powder blue, like, button-up shirt that was for a man that was too big for me. And I think there was a tie, and I was the only woman on stage. I was dressed just like all of the men. And we're getting set up. And I put my saxophone down on the stand. And a woman is like down by the tables, kind of near the stage. And she's like, oh, excuse me. And she's looking directly at me. And she's like, excuse me, could you come here? And I was like, oh, aren't me? Like, okay, I'll come over. I don't know who this woman is. And I get closer and she says, yeah, can we have a table?
Oh, she thought you were the waitstaff.
Yeah, because I'm on stage with a saxophone, dressed like all of the musicians. But I think the only difference is that I'm a woman and I'm the waitstaff. It was just the strangest. Right. It was the strangest misunderstanding. Yeah, I was just boggled by it. I still think about it sometimes. What was that?
How did you respond?
Did
you take on the role then in like walk her to a table?
Oh, I should have.
Wouldn't that have been fun?
Yeah. I was just flabbergasted. I was like, no. I like point. I like couldn't say anything. I just like point at my saxophone, like no. Yeah, very strange.
Have you ever done any touring?
No, not really. I've pretty much just stayed around. The problem is like, I've got that 9 to 5, so I've missed out on some of the really fun musicianship kind of things. But I did have to turn down a tour with the Scatolites like a couple years ago, which is like, oh, I wish, because they saw me play with a ska band, and again, it's like. Being a female musician is a blessing and a curse. You do stand out. Like, you are a person that people remember, and they remembered me. Sure. And so they were like, yeah, we want you. We want this one. And I just, it was like 2 weeks on the road, and I think there was like something really important happening in my company during that time, and I just couldn't do it. But you know what? It went to a very deserving musician, so I don't feel too bad.
That's good.
Yeah. It's like the years of the end of school and the beginning of living in Chicago. I feel like a lot of my gigs, I felt like I was in over my head, just because I was doing so many new things and things that I hadn't done before. I mean, so much of certain gigs is just having the muscle memory and like knowing how things go and knowing what's going to happen. Not necessarily the music itself, but if you don't know what the next tune is going to be or how quickly something's going to change, I don't know, that can make you worse at the music. So I think a lot of that has that'll make me nervous. But
have you performed for anyone famous? You've probably had more famous people on your podcast.
I did talk to Bill Nye last week, which was pretty cool.
What?
Yeah,
that is so cool.
Yeah, it was very cool. I'm so bad with names. I know when I first came to Chicago, I was regularly doing the apartment jams, which were, on the south side.
Von Freeman's.
Yeah, yeah. So there was Von Freeman, and then tons of people would come in. They were coming through town, and they would always go to this jam. So I definitely was at least in the room with some really big names. And I mean, talk about being a lady musician, on the south side. On the south side, these gigs that get out
in
at
late
3
night,
a.m.
I know, right?
Yeah, I think I was very naive at the time, so I didn't even think there was anything wrong with it. Like, people would sometimes be like, "You, girl, like, let me walk with you. Like, what do you do? Like, let me at least walk with you to your car." And be like, "Oh, okay, that's fine." I understand now that was a lot more dangerous than I realized. You know who I've been really fascinated by recently is Lil Hardin Armstrong. You know who that is? That is Louis Armstrong's wife.
Oh,
and
okay.
She, I'm just fascinated by her because we don't talk about her, but she was an incredible musician who was like more famous than Louis was before he came to, I believe, Chicago. She like had a name for herself. She was going, she was gigging around town. She had her own band, and she like.
What was her instrument?
She's a piano player.
Okay.
And so she wrote a lot of Louis Armstrong's music, and I just, I feel like I don't know enough about her. I would love to just find out like what her experience was, because I feel like that's a really common thing for women, even if you are talented and even if you have your own thing going. Like the minute you become attached to a man, you are like people just assume that the man
you're the
got
supporting
you.
role.
Yeah,
you're the supporting role now. Yeah. Did they play together? Are there recordings of them?
She's on a lot of I think Strutting with Some Barbecue. Don't quote me on that.
Wow.
Is the one I think she wrote it and she's on it. Yeah. Yeah, I think it's fascinating.
Thanks again, Ashley, for sharing your stories with us on the Weird Gig podcast. Ashley and I have played in a band together for a few years now, and she's moving to one of our favorite towns, Asheville, North Carolina. We'll miss you, Ashley, but I'll feel connected to you when I walk my dog and listen to cool science stuff on your Curiosity Daily podcast. I'll put more links to Ashley's happenings on our Weird Gig website. Underscoring music on today's show is by Ashley in the Chicago funk band Fuzz, and that's Fuzz with 3 Z's. Songs included on this episode are Robo Jones and Stumblin' Home. The Weird Gig podcast theme song is performed by Patrick Williams, Vance Okrashevsky, and yours truly. And as usual, if you're digging the show, tell your friends. Pass the show along to others through YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, SoundCloud, or become a sponsor of our show on Anchor.fm. As of this week, not only can you find us on podcast services like iTunes and Spotify, but also on Amazon's Audible. Please be advised that this broadcast is intended to include a fair report or summary of commentary by one or more independent content providers. Any opinion expressed during this broadcast does not necessarily reflect the views of anyone else involved in conducting or presenting these interviews. We'll check in with you next week for a new episode and fascinating musician guests. Come for the stories, stay for the weird.
Bye.